How Far? Chapter 4. Not Alone. Things were really looking up for us. Over the course of a few weeks, we had gone on several more scouting/supply runs. With the radios that we picked up from the National Guard building, we were able to communicate while out on a run. That made it a hell of a lot easier to keep track of everyone. We even got up to the point where we were sending out multiple groups at once. Every time a group went out, my map was updated with every small detail I could possibly fit on it. The south end of town was a red zone. The hospital must have been overrun first with all the employees still inside of it, and it didn't help that our Walmart was directly across the street. If people had just been more sensible and waited until the initial outbreak cooled down, then maybe there would be more of us alive. From the reports that I got from everyone that got within a couple miles of the place, there's absolutely no way that we could ever clear it out. There has to be at least a good half the town's population between these two structures. If there was anyone that was on that side of town when it happened, they were done. It's an absolute hellhole over there. I just hope they don't migrate north. If a horde of that size wanted to, it could roll us over without even trying. We also found a few places in town that, fortunately for us, no one had managed to loot. Even with minimal rationing of our supplies, we had enough to last us for a long time. We finally had the time and resources to look for those that weren't with us when all this started. Dead or alive, we all needed the closure of knowing what had happened to them. My brother, for one. As each week passed since the beginning, I had started losing hope that he made it out and that he'd still find his way back to us. Anyways, on to a more positive note. While we were out looking for supplies, we also found out that we weren't alone. There's a few areas that other survivors had made into a small community. There was an apartment tower near the town center, another at the police station, a small group of people at a couple nursing homes, and several others with very small numbers. Among them, there was only one that we had made contact with. It wasn't even on purpose. I've instructed everyone to stay clear of these groups, and under no circumstances are we to contact them. As the resources in town diminished, so too would their hospitality. But one day a group of biters chased me, Sam, and Ocean into what used to be an old pet store. "Hurry up and get that door open! They're right behind us!" Ocean got to the door first. "It's locked! Or there's something blocking it from the other side." I looked behind my shoulder as I sprinted through the parking lot. There were at least 15 of those fuckers tailing us, maybe 100 feet from us. "Sam, guns up!" We had a couple semi-automatic AR-15s with only a couple extra magazines. "Aim for the legs!" As Sam and I shot as many as we could, I could hear Ocean behind us starting to become frantic. "I can't get the fucking door open! There has to be another way around." Without taking my eyes off the group of biters closing in on our position, I answered her. "There's no time. We can't outrun them now. Make sure to save a bullet. You'll thank me on the other side." Just as I finished my sentence, my rifle ran dry. I didn't have time to reload it, so I slung it to my side and pulled out my handgun and began firing again. I counted each bullet. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fuck. I looked on as 5 or 6 biters were still sprinting closer. My gaze switched from them to Sam at my left. He had run out of ammo too. The look in his eyes was one of a man that was counting the seconds until he stopped breathing. I then glanced back to Ocean from the corner of my eye. Just then I thought I saw the door open a little. Was it just my mind playing tricks on me into thinking that there was still hope? No. It was opening. A fraction of a second later, it opened even further and I could see a small pale woman inside the darkness waving us to come inside. Ocean wasted no time to slip through the gap in the door. I grabbed Sam by the shoulder and threw him through the opening, and I followed. Just as the door closed behind me, I could see the biters were only a couple feet away now. I could see the silhouette of a giant hulk of a man slam the door shut. Then there was nothing but darkness, and the sound of those things outside bashing against the barred windows. As I stood there in the relative silence of the room, aside from my group's staggered panting and the noise from outside, I saw the flick of a lighter from the other side of the room. The woman lit a small candle and set it on the counter of the pet store. "I'm sorry that we didn't open the door sooner. We weren't sure if you were here to rob us. And for the record, I'm still not sure. But I'll give you a chance. My name's Rebecca, and this is Roberto." After a few seconds of composing myself, I was finally able to catch my breath enough to make a coherent sentence. "Thank you. I know it's hard to trust people these days, but Before I could finish, Roberto cut me off. "We don't trust you, but we also weren't going to leave you out there to die." I could understand where they were coming from. In this world, it's hard to trust anyone considering everything. "Look, I get it, we're strangers. But I promise you, if we weren't about to just die, we'd never have come here. We didn't even know that you were in here. Besides, I don't think anybody's going to try and take on this big guy here." I gestured to Roberto. He was easily 6'6" and built like a tank. I have no idea how this guy could possibly have enough food to feed those muscles. We spent probably around 30 minutes exchanging stories and getting comfortable to wait out the biters outside before my radio went off. "Vulture 2, this is Nest. Check in." Rebecca and Roberto were startled by the transmission. "You have a radio? There's others out there?" I pulled the radio off my backpack strap. "Yeah, sorry, I was getting around to that. My group has radios to stay in contact." I handed the radio to Sam and he stepped away from the group to respond. Rebecca stepped closer to me. "So, how many of you are there?" I stood silent for a moment, contemplating her question. On the one hand, they did just save our lives, but yet I couldn't bring myself to trust these people. I don't think I can really share that with you. It's nothing personal, but you're really the only other people that we've met out here, and like I said, we never even meant to cross your path. Thank you for helping us out of all that back there, but as soon as they're gone, so are we." Rebecca and Roberto exchanged questioning glances. "So, we save your lives, shelter you from the dead, share war stories, and we're still untrustworthy?" I quickly stammered a response. "No, that's not what I meant. Look, we really appreciate your help and fully understand that we'd be dead if it wasn't for you two. But I still hardly know you. You seem like good people, but I don't want to do or say anything that would put the rest of us in danger. My group is made up of mostly my own family. I hope that you can understand that." There was a short period of silence before Rebecca finally broke it. "We understand. You're lucky you haven't lost anyone yet. I had to watch most of my family turn, and Roberto here never got a chance to make it back to his. I'd do anything to keep them safe if they were still here." I could see tears starting to form in her eyes before she bowed her head and turned around. Roberto put a hand on her shoulder and turned back towards me. "You're the only other living people that we've seen in so long. We began to think that there wasn't anyone else left alive, and then you come along, and once you leave, we'll be alone again. Each day we live could be our last, and no one deserves to go out thinking that they're alone." He turned back to her, consoling her as best as he could. I was so busy worrying about my own family that I had never thought about how everyone else in the world was doing. I may have trust issues, but these were still people, living human beings with emotion, thoughts, fears. Maybe I was wrong to stay away from them for so long, but at the same time I've seen places that were ransacked, littered with bullet holes and dead bodies. Not everyone that's left deserves to be treated like a human. But I'm not God. I mean, who am I to choose who deserves to be left to their own devices and who deserves help? I mean, how long could these two continue to live off of dog food and each other's company? It's a miracle that they made it this long. Look, I can't bring you back with us. We just don't have the space, but I have a spare radio in my pack and some food and water. I know it isn't much, but maybe it'll help. Tune to this frequency and call to Nest with the call sign Macaw. If you're ever in trouble, I'll do what I can. I can't promise much, though. I handed Roberto a piece of paper with a separate channel frequency than what we usually use. I set a couple large water bottles out and some bags with assorted granola bars, ramen packets, and canned fruits out on the checkout counter. In the end, they thanked us, and when we were sure that the biters outside had moved on, we left. That was the first time I had ever shown sympathy for other survivors out there. I was afraid I had made a mistake by even allowing them to keep one of our radios, but I don't know if I could live with myself basically sentencing them to death by leaving them with nothing. Other than that one exception, we kept to the no contact rule despite my question of the reason behind it. We didn't contact them a whole lot aside from dropping by a couple times whenever one of our teams was out past dark and even bringing them with us on a few supply runs. I think part of me wanted to know that they were still okay out there. They started to grow on me. But we had things that needed to be done, people to find. First up was Ocean. Her brother was still out there somewhere, and she needed to know exactly what happened to him, for better or for worse. As for myself, As for myself, my brother was a bit more of a difficult matter to tackle. He wasn't just across town, he was 2.5 hours away. This is going to take a lot of careful planning and a hell of a lot of supplies. Not only would the trip use a ton of gas that we were already on short supply of, but we also had to make sure that we could stay out there for a long time if something went wrong. I decided in the interest of time that we should plan the searches simultaneously and execute them on the same day. The team going for Rio, my little cousin, consisted of Ocean, of course, Hunter, and Sam. My team consisted of myself, Annabelle, and Jake. I figured teams of 3 would be plenty to make sure that everyone made it back safe, but also small enough to move effectively. We must have been planning routes for days before we had a plan everyone was comfortable with. We loaded up my mom's SUV with enough supplies to last a week out there if we had to. The other team took minimal supplies and loaded it up into Ocean's SUV since they would only be gone for a couple days at most if they were lucky. I left everyone else to manage themselves while we were gone. Most of our fighting force would be going out, and that left the house in a weakened state, but our defenses were sturdy enough that I was comfortable leaving them alone. I stepped close to my mom and my uncle. There's enough supplies here that you shouldn't have to leave the house until we get back. You don't take any risks, and if anything, absolutely anything, goes wrong, you radio us, and both teams will turn around, understand? My uncle nodded and gave me a pat on the shoulder. We'll be okay. If anything even farts in this direction, I have a raging bull to send him packing. We both chuckled as he pulled out his absolutely massive revolver and kissed it on the barrel. Then he started off back into the house. I turned to my mom, who, until now, I hadn't noticed started to tear up. I'll bring Stone back, Mom. Everything's gonna be okay. She threw her arms around me and we held each other tight. Come home safe. Please. I need you all to come back to me safe. I kissed her on the cheek and hugged her tighter. We will. I'll keep him safe. Make sure that nobody here gets into too much trouble while we're gone. You know how Grandpa likes to get ornery. We shared some soft laughter, and after a minute, she finally brought herself to let me go. I started walking towards the SUV where Annabelle and Jake were already waiting for me. I opened the door, and before stepping in, I called to my mom. You got nothing to worry about. We'll be back before you know it, and our family will finally be home again. I sat in the driver's seat of the car and looked up to Annabelle in the passenger seat. Did you tell Grandma and Grandpa bye? She looked up with an almost disgusted face.
You know I always do, bitch.
I chuckled under my breath, just checking. Then we were off. Ocean, Hunter, and Sam split off from us a couple of blocks down and we continued on the marked route. Do you two mind if we make a stop at the pet shop on our way out? Annabelle and Jake shrugged, obviously not a care in the world that they were going to be away from home for the longest time in a while to a place that could be 10 times as bad. It only took a few minutes to pull up to the pet store. You two can wait out here if you want, I shouldn't be too long. But keep your heads on a swivel and your rifles loaded. They nodded and shooed me away as they immediately started talking and started a game of 21 or something with a deck of cards. I wish I could be that worry-free, I muttered to myself as I closed the car door behind me. I walked around the side of the building to the back door and knocked. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps on the other side of the door. It's just me, I said quietly. A few seconds after that, the door opened and Roberto stepped out and gave me a big old bear hug. Valente! ¿Qué pasa, my friend? After he let me go, I could finally breathe and I answered him. Roberto, long time no see. Sorry I didn't call ahead, I just wanted to stop by before we left. It's gonna be a long ride. He ushered me into the doorway and closed it behind us. Long ride? Where you going? As he lit a candle to guide us through the dark interior of the building, we started walking towards the front. Me, my sister, and one of our friends are going up north to try and find my brother. A puzzled look made its way across his face. How far north? Nowhere too bad, I hope. I continued following Roberto through the darkness, trying not to trip over several items that were still strewn across the floor. Lawrence. Hopefully it's not as bad as we think. We finally made it to the front area that Rebecca and him had made into their home. There he turned on a lantern sitting on a few boxes and blew out the candle. As the lantern lit up the large room, I could see Rebecca sound asleep on a mattress laying on the ground. Lawrence, that's a big place. Lots of people. Lots of infected too, probably. I leaned down to Rebecca, slightly shaking her shoulder. She jolted slightly until she saw that it was me. "Hey, I'm so sorry. Did you call us on the radio? I must have missed it." She quickly stood up and hugged me tight. Not as tight as Roberto, but still enough to squeeze the breath out of me. "Hey, Becca. I didn't have the chance to call. Like I was telling Roberto, I just wanted to stop by before we left town." I then filled her in on the plan to go find my brother and bring him back home. "Hold on, so it's just you three? That place could be completely overrun by now. Who knows how hard this thing hit there? I mean, that's a lot of people in a small area. You sure about this?" I was sitting on a box next to Becca, and across from us, Roberto was keeping an eye out the window. "Yeah, man. I know it's your brother, but this whole thing sounds like it could go bad in a hurry." I looked up to Roberto, now scratching his stubbly chin as if pondering something. "Do you two remember what you said to me that first day that we met? You said that you'd do anything to keep your family safe. I don't have a choice. I need to find out if he's still out there, even if he isn't alive." They both pushed their gazes to their shoes. A short pause later, Becca finally spoke up. "What if we went with you?" Both Roberto and my eyes shot up to meet hers. "You want to go with me? We were just talking about how dangerous this is." Roberto stepped back towards us, away from the store's window. "I'm in." I stood up, looking to both of them. Whoa, not so fast. I don't think you know what you're agreeing to here. I didn't come up here to convince you to come with me. I just wanted to make sure that you were okay before I left. You don't have to do this." Becca and Roberto both exchanged glances, almost like they were having a silent conversation, agreeing that they wanted this. Rebecca looked to me with determination in her eyes. "Maybe you didn't come here to take us with you, but you're wrong about one thing. We do have to do this. I lost my family, and Roberto may never get the chance to find his, but I'll be damned if we let you all go alone. We have a chance to reunite you with your brother. Yeah, it may be dangerous, but if there's a chance, then we have to try." I took a moment to take in what she was saying. "Look, you two don't owe me anything. I'll be honest, we might not make it back. That's why I really came here. I wouldn't admit it to anyone else, especially not my family. But I know this mission ends most likely with us at Spider Food. I don't want you following me to your deaths on a fool's errand." That sentence was followed by a long silence, until Becca finally grabbed my hand and held it in hers. She looked up to me and said in a soft voice, "That's why we don't have a choice. You said that we don't owe you anything, but we do. More than likely, if you hadn't stumbled across us that day, we wouldn't still be here. And not to mention how nice it's been to be around you and your people. We would have ended up starving, or going insane, or slipping up and ending up Biter Food anyways. Might as well go out doing something that matters, right?" Roberto nodded in agreement and put his giant hand on my shoulder. "We're with you, amigo. If you meet God, so do we." I actually started to cry. It had been so long since I've cried, I forgot what it felt like. I guess I never really had time to, considering that I was so caught up with everyone else. These two were the closest things that I had to friends in a long time. I mean, Jake was cool, but he was younger and related more to Annabelle and Sam than he did to me. I hugged them both, composed myself, and looked at them with a newfound determination. "Alright then. Take a couple minutes and grab whatever you think you'll need and meet me out front in the SUV. We already have plenty of food and water, so don't worry about that." They nodded and began rummaging through their supplies as I walked outside. Once I opened the front door, both Annabelle and Jake looked up to me.
Goddamn, took you long enough. Are we going now?
I sat back into the driver's seat and watched as Becca and Roberto opened the front door with several makeshift weapons and armor on either of their persons. They're coming with us. Thank you guys so much for watching. As you probably noticed, there was a new voice actor, as I would call it. I'm going to try and do some more stuff like that, so that in the future, when there are situations that require someone else's point of view, I'll be able to use someone else's voice, just to keep things more clearly for not only myself, but for listeners as well. And I hope that turns out great, but we'll just have to wait and see. So let me know what you think.